Hi, everyone. Good morning. So I got to push the icon there. Good morning from LA. I think it's afternoon already in the East Coast, but I'm Danny Guerrero, VP North America Strategy for MMGY Global. Also serve as our agency's co-chair of the DEI Council. And I'm really excited today to be presenting a case study of a project that really for us talks about the importance of partnership and collaboration when you talk about the topic of racial equity and inclusion. This project really came to be as a result of a great partnership that we first established as an agency with the Black Travel Alliance and a tenured relationship we have as a client partner with Destination Cleveland. So I'm really excited to get into the case study. First, I want to introduce everybody on the panel. Again, I'm Danny, and I will not take any more time. I really want to kind of jump to letting our panelists introduce themselves and our presenters. And the way this is going to work is we're going to kind of go through a case study and kind of set up the situation, set up how we tackled it, the approach, and then the outcome so that you get a clear sense of how we really approached the project with Destination Cleveland. But first and foremost, I'd like to welcome Ursula Petula-Barzi, who's been a longtime collaborator of MMGY and also Destination Cleveland. Ursula, welcome.
Thank you very much, Danny. Hello, everyone. It's great to be here. I am currently serving as a board member and the research unit committee chair for the Black Travel Alliance. I will tell you more about the Black Travel Alliance later, but I also do two things. I work as a digital marketing consultant, working primarily with travel and tour operators who are here in Europe, and I also have a blog focusing on the Caribbean region. So that's a little bit about me, and I'll tell you more about the Black Travel Alliance in the presentation.
Thanks, Ursula, and welcome from London, by the way.
Yes, thank
We're
you.
It's happy hour time.
Yes.
And up next, we have Hannah Belcito, who is the Chief Experience Officer with Destination Cleveland. Welcome, Hannah.
Thank you so much, Danny. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you all for choosing to join with us today. I'm Hannah Belcito, the Chief Experience Officer for Destination Cleveland. Greetings from Cleveland. We're hosting the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction ceremonies this weekend, so there's a lot of activity on the street right outside my window. We are Cleveland's destination marketing organization, and my role within Destination Cleveland is improving how we look, act, and feel as a destination city so that we're ready to welcome all of you. And I work hand in hand with Colette Jones, who I will pass it over to.
Thanks, Hannah. Welcome, Colette.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Colette Jones. I head up marketing and communications at Destination Cleveland, which means I'm always thinking about how to improve the narrative and the reputation of Cleveland through our brand and marketing. I have been with Destination Cleveland for close to 10 years, and I'm really excited to be here with all of you.
Fantastic. Thank you all for making the time. It's been fun preparing for this session. A little bit about our agency. So I wanted to kind of just go through what we do. MMGY really is focused squarely in the travel and tourism marketing space and hospitality. So one of the things that we do with destination clients like Cleveland is really not only to talk about how we impact branding through research, but also increasingly, obviously, since the tragic death of George Floyd, is having these conversations, and as the industry is having, regarding how do we empower our clients to be more inclusive in their approach, locally within community building, with resident sentiment, but also in the way that those things show up in marketing. So I think the nice thing about this case study today is we kind of touch on all those things. So really proud to have that conversation today. Really, and I want to thank Cheryl. Cheryl's on the call today. Cheryl's a VP of Travel Intelligence at MMGY and has signed up for this conference. I know has been active all week. I really want to thank Cheryl specifically. Cheryl's been an absolute champion within the MMGY Travel Intelligence Division. So applause to Cheryl and for really looking at the way that MMGY Travel, for nearly 40 years now, we've been producing some of the most relevant data for travel and tourism organizations. And a few years back, I kind of snuck up in Cheryl's DMs, and I was like, hey, so if I wanted to know more about Black travelers or Latinx travelers, how would that look like? And we started to have really productive conversations. And where we are now is 2 studies in. Romy mentioned the Visas Latinos study that we just launched last month. 100% of the proceeds go back to Travel Unity. So we hope that if you are in the position to support that you buy that report. Incredible insights on underrepresented communities, but really a platform and a catalyst for having conversations and empowering more insights. The Black Traveler program, the Black Travel Research Program, was the first of its kind study that we did. And Ursula And I and the MMGY Travel Intelligence team, Cheryl and many others have been working for many months now, over a year, at least a year and a half now, on building this study. This was released earlier this year in January 2021 as a 2-phase report that captured the sentiment of global Black travelers in the US and Canada, UK, France, Germany, and really talked about some key insights, right? The power of the Black traveler, the importance of this segment of the population that, in pre-pandemic times was accounting for over 13% of total US travel spend, and increasingly contributing almost $130 billion. This was just scratching the surface of what we started to see about Black traveler needs. A lot of the research showed us some, really uncomfortable facts and truths about the Black travel experience, both on the leisure side and the meeting professional side. And that report also is available for sale. 100% of the proceeds go back to the Black Travel Alliance, among other organizations. But I say this because it's really important, obviously, that we talk about and kind of take a step back in terms of where the BTA and where our clients have been in navigating this information, taking the research, knowing it's out there, listening to the consumer, what they're saying, but at the same time at home, listening to community and empowering community conversations. So with that said, I want to toss it over to Colette to talk a little bit about where Destination Cleveland was, how they interconnected with the BTA before we even talked about this project, because I think it's important for us to get a sense of kind of the timeline of things. So Colette, over to you.
Thanks so much, Danny. Hi, everyone. That was a great segue into really some of the work that we started to do last summer. So around the time that COVID hit and then what happened with the George Floyd murder, we really kicked off looking very deeply into who we were as an organization and how were we showing up in this space of equity and inclusion. And when the Black Travel Alliance launched their hashtag Pull Up for Travel campaign and really submitted a call to all the different travel organizations to be honest and put out there for public airing, are you being inclusive and equitable in your marketing? And this was really I like the saying of, using the black square is very easy, but how do you get really honest about what you're doing as a marketer? And, for me as a Black female leading a marketing team, this was scary for me. It's like, okay, have I really been doing, what my community would wish that I was doing? And so we participated in the Pull Up for Travel campaign, and we found that there were some serious outages in some of the areas that they were calling out as points of measurement. We had started really thinking about a few years ago, how do we become more inclusive? So it was good to see that we'd made some improvements, but when you really, and this is my personal feeling, I feel like the George Floyd murder was really asking organizations to look beyond, look at your marketing, but also look beyond just your marketing. How is your organization structured? What does your staff look like? And really starting to think about the systemic and structural racism that's contributing to so many of the inequities in our communities. So that's where we started. The next slide, please. The other thing that happened locally was there was this public statement of support on racism as a public health crisis. And we signed this. The original declaration was signed by about 30 organizations. And then over time, I want to say it got up to 150. But the more that we were looking at this, we ended this statement by saying, and this day forward, let our actions speak louder than our words. We declared this in probably July, and July came and went, and the Pull Up for Travel came and went, and then it was August, and we kind of had this reckoning with ourselves of what are our actions? What are we actually going to do? And so this was really where we started to kind of question, how have we been showing up in our actions? And for me, how have I been showing up in the way that I'm marketing the destination? Next slide, please. And so with that work happening and really our communities calling for and demanding for us to really look at how we're showing up, I took a look back at, what did we do when we came up with our brand in 2012? What was the objective? And really looking at it, when we came up with the visitor brand back in 2012, it was to create a visitor brand to leverage what was nearly $3 billion in visitor related assets in our downtown Cleveland and University Circle neighborhoods. There was just all this activity that was going on to really build up these assets. And what's really interesting, and we'll come full circle on this, note that I said downtown Cleveland and University Circle. A really interesting point to note when you start thinking about systemic and structural racism is there are very few minority owned businesses in downtown Cleveland and in University Circle. But that was the focus of the brand. So just keep that in mind as we move forward and talk about equity and inclusion. The 2014 visitor brand promise was why we have world-class arts, culture, and rock and roll. We never take ourselves too seriously. The result is irreverent and fun and always unmistakably Cleveland. So we went out with this visitor brand and marketed the city. You can go to the next slide. And the way that we really thought about our marketing was based on the messaging that we just mentioned. We really focused on events-oriented marketing. We targeted geo markets in Columbus, Pittsburgh, and Cincinnati. And when we looked at what audience would be the most open to coming to Cleveland to visit our downtown and University Circle, it was millennial males, 25 to 34 in those areas. And we came up with a persona name of Matt. The other thing that we really dug into is what role do residents play in recommending our destination, and they were identified as being the third most important source of information for Cleveland. But when we asked them if they would recommend Cleveland, only 34% said they would. The other thing I want you guys to kind of hang on to is that our consumer persona was named Matt, and think about how that might have come across to some of our communities of color. So next slide, please. So we launched the brand and we launched a hashtag called #ThisIsCLE. We actually launched it to residents. We launched it to what we call the 34% who were recommending Cleveland, who were willing to recommend Cleveland, and asked them to post their version of Cleveland. We rolled that out before we actually rolled out the visitor brand. And we were able to leverage that visitor brand that we launched to win a number of major events. And we saw some great results. These results are from 2019. As you all know, 2020 was a hard year for visitation. So looking back at 2019, we saw that since the brand had launched, that the number of visitors was up more than 31%. Our direct tourism spending was up 47%. We had nearly a 15% increase in jobs. Resident recommendation increased from 34% to 81% as of the beginning of this year. And then 36% of millennials would consider travel to Cleveland, up from 14%. So we understand that 36% isn't high. We still have work to do in terms of Cleveland's narrative, but it was definitely significantly higher than it was in 13. So my point in sharing that with you, those results with you, is that we saw a lot of successes with that visitor brand. But what we also know is that by focusing on those communities and the types of events that Cleveland was having, it's that the brand was not inclusive, and a lot of people felt left out of it because they were. And so next slide, please. And so after taking that step back and understanding that we really needed to take some action, we launched our recovery and regrowth plan, which is really about doubling down on the local economy and helping support our local businesses. But then we decided it was also critical that we publicly acknowledge our role in unconsciously perpetuating systemic racism. And I think if we're honest with ourselves, there's times when we were doing it and we may have been, it was mentioned to us, but in terms of what we were being asked to do in terms of marketing some of our visitor neighborhoods and to market downtown and to market University Circle, what we thought we were doing, we were delivering on what we were being asked to do, but it was leaving people out, which is something that we had to face and publicly acknowledge. So next slide, please. And so when we really thought about, what is it that we need to do to really take action, we decided that we needed to develop a set of actions that we would take on, and we launched a racial equity board task force. And their objective was to develop that set of actions that we were going to ensure that we perform in our mission. How do we ensure that everything that we do is aligned with our mission and really become more of a trusted advisor and partner to the community. And so we were talking about this morning, and a group of people said, how was it, for you all to really focus on that, given that tourism was down so significantly? And really the great thing about our community is that, and our board was that they said, no, this is really important. We have to do this. It's no longer an option. It's something that we absolutely have to do. Next slide, please. And so we had this wonderful opportunity to evolve our brand. We saw a lot of successes, but we also understand that there's a lot of mistakes that I made in developing that brand at that time. So, and really looking at what we need to do, we want to evolve the Destination Cleveland visitor brand to be inclusive, so as to attract a diverse set of audiences, and to get people to not only visit, but to also get them to consider living and working in our region as well. So that's what our brand evolution is. And so when we were really thinking about this brand evolution, it became a question of, okay, so how do we start to get input? Next slide, please. And that's where a lot of this started. It was, and to use, we worked with a local organization called Third Space Action Lab. And what they talked about, it was, really getting proximate with the community. How do we really make sure that we understand what they're looking for, how they want to be engaged, and how they want to be a part of the Cleveland story? And so we launched a set of, we launched what we called a listening tour, basically, where we wanted to invite our Black and Hispanic communities to hear about how we'd been marketing the community and tell us how to improve. We were there to say, we need to improve. And having done our branding work with MMGY originally, we signed up with them again to do our brand evolution, but really understood that we needed to do more and make sure the right people were at the table. And so top of mind was that hashtag pull up for travel. So I reached out to the MMGY team and I said, hey, it seems like you probably have a connection given that you all did the Black Traveler Study. And we actually had the opportunity to buy the Black Traveler Study. And I'm really proud that we actually helped to sponsor the Hispanic Traveler Study. The MMGY did, but we reached out to Black Travel Alliance and said, we need your help. How do we make sure that all these learnings are relevant, definitely locally, but also as we go forth and market? And so that's where this wonderful partnership really came together in terms of leveraging the hashtag pull for travel, the research that they did in collaboration with MMGY, and then moving forward and allowing us to partner together on our local REI listening tour. Next slide, please. With that, back to you, Danny.
Thank you, Colette. That's a fantastic overview and setup. And thank you for, again, the trust and the partnership on this. Ursula, obviously, when we first started collaborating on this, it was a new project for us where we had to build kind of the approach and the scope. And I really just love the way that the Black Travel Alliance embraced the opportunity to put kind of the concept of empowering destinations and action into action, right? Going beyond the research to doing the work. So talk to us a little bit about how you guys manage this approach and kind of what you learned during the process. I'm really fascinated to hear kind of the recap.
Right, so looking forward to it. So next slide, please. Before we do that, since I know some people may not be familiar with the Black Travel Alliance, I'll give you a little bit of background. So like most people, Black travel content creators, we were sitting at home, and then the tragic death of, George Floyd happened on May 25th, I think it was. And then a week later, we meet weekly for a round table. And we were like, we've got to do something, because there's a disconnect between what we're hearing from the, DMOs as well as, travel brands. And from that came the Black Travel Alliance. Like literally, I think we had our first meeting on June 5th, and then we launched the organization on June 16th. So it was a 2-week turnaround. We were that strong about, we could no longer sit on the sidelines, because this is something that we had seen for years. And it's like, if now if not now, when? And so we formed a nonprofit, organization. There were 18 of us who took the lead. We currently serve a community of 640 Black travel content creators, but in our extended database is over 2,000 plus people, and our three pillars are alliance, amplification, as well as accountability. And so alliance is all about us coming together. Amplification is us sharing each other's voices, and then the whole accountability part is primarily relates to the DMOs as well as the travel brands, and holding them accountable for their inaction or so. And that's where, when we launched, in the press release, which I actually wrote, it was like, we can't just say we're launching, we need to launch strong and hard. And so that's where the Pull Up for Travel campaign came about. The official name is actually the Black Travel Alliance Industry Scorecard, but that didn't have the kind of oomph that we wanted. So that's where Pull Up for Travel comes into play. Next slide, Danny. Right. And so, specifically, what was the Pull Up for Travel campaign? We asked DMOs as well as travel brands who were posting Black squares for, Black Lives Matter as well as Black Out Tuesday to say, okay, you say you support the cause, please share with us your KPIs. We don't want statements. Please tell us what your KPIs as it relates to employment, conferences and trade shows, your paid, marketing efforts, your press trips, your charity efforts. And this last one here, vendors, is one that we have since added. But really, give us your numbers to show the representatives of Black people, within the framework of what you do as a travel brand or as a DMO. And no surprise, we got lots of statements, but it was a start. And if you go to the next slide, Danny. Right, so we had, across primarily Instagram, because that's where we saw most of, the offending posts. We saw over, 121, travel organizations who had posted. About 100 of those were from the United States, but there were a few. There was even one from, Japan, which was like, wow, okay. And in terms of DMOs, there were 16 DMOs that actually responded to our Pull Up for Travel campaign. And of the 16, Destination Cleveland was one of those. And not only did they give a statement, but they actually gave numbers, which we were really grateful for. And so that was a good foundation. And also, we have subsequently attempted to do a follow-up, more formal study. Destination Cleveland was one who responded in full. So that's one of the reasons why we were, excited to work with them, because they're very serious about making the change. Not only are they putting things out, but they're, doing what they say they want to do. Next slide, Danny. Right, so in terms of the project, which came in two parts. So for the project, it was primarily the research team who has worked on the Black Traveler Study, as well as a history of Black travel that we're currently working on. And we basically did a lot of deep diving, because while most of us have been to Cleveland before, we wanted to make sure that we were not just giving generic advice. So we looked at all the visitor data, did a lot of web research, and not just for Destination Cleveland, but also the nearby destinations, because it's a drive location. So most of the visitors who come to Cleveland drive to Cleveland. And from that, we provided input into what questions to ask during the listening sessions. There were 6 listening sessions in total, and we participated in 5 of them. These listening sessions took place over the course of a month. And really, during the listening sessions, we had different roles. So in the bottom right there, you see Kerwin McKenzie, and he was our official note taker. So pretty much, whatever was said, it was like, okay, Kerwin, please make note of it. And then I was more like listening to hear points that I could then turn into questions. Marty was listening more from a diversity consultant standpoint. So we all had different roles in terms of how we were participating in each of the sessions. And then so we took lots of notes. And then that led to the formal study, which we will go on to the next slide for. Right, and so really, why a formal survey? Because the 6 listening sessions actually, provided a wealth of information, but the challenge there is that the audiences was quite mixed. So some of the sessions were local business leaders, some were historians, community folks, some were researchers, and because less than 10% of the partners for Destination Cleveland are Black and Brown, we really want to make sure that whatever recommendations we presented spoke to this unique audience. So similar to the Black traveler and the study that we did with MMGY, it's like, okay, this is one of the other pieces of the equation. You really need to understand who are these Black and Brown businesses, and what is their product, what are their challenges, and really deep dive into what they can bring to the table. Plus, we wanted to validate a lot of things that we heard during the listening sessions, because the lead person or the person who was asking the questions was a local agency, which was really good in some senses, but as a researcher and as a marketer, there were times where I wanted that follow-up question that didn't quite happen. So that's where the survey really helped to get more grounded data. Next slide, please. Right. So so after the month-long of listening sessions, then a week to write the survey. It didn't really take a week, more like a day plus, because we started the survey from scratch. And the starting point was, reviewing all the notes and then saying, okay, what is really needed here? And so there were 4 key areas that we wanted to ask people who responded to the survey. We wanted to make sure that we had a good understanding of who they were, what type of business they had, the employees, the structure, how they currently do marketing, what was successful. Then we wanted to ask questions that were very specific to Destination Cleveland, lots of services that are currently being offered, but just from the listening sessions, it became clear that a lot of those were not well known. And so it was outlining, okay, these are all the things that, Destination Cleveland offers, which ones are most important to you? Okay, based on the ones that are important to you, how much would you pay for that? Just a whole host of questions to really make sure that, whatever recommendations and, whatever, Destination Cleveland, moved forward with, it made sense based on what the data was really showing. And then finally, we asked some questions around the city of Cleveland, because during the listening sessions, we got lots of ideas, or we heard lots of ideas as to how, Destination Cleveland should market the city. And so we wanted to validate, some of those things. And so that was that last batch of questions. So once the survey was written, we sent it over to Hannah, who then circulated it to the rest of the Destination Cleveland team. And then feedback was given, tweaks were made. And then once that was done, it was programmed by MMGY. And then once that was done, it was distributed by Hannah at Destination Cleveland. And we actually did 3 rounds of emails over a 2.5-week period to the target audience there, which was 125 Black and brown hospitality business. I actually was a little bit worried about the sample size, but like based on the data that we got back, it totally makes sense to just focus on the hospitality businesses and not trying to expand it to other types of Black businesses. Next slide, please. Right, and so in terms of results, so based on the 3 rounds of emails that we sent out, 45 started the survey, and 33 actually, completed it from start to finish, which was really good because it was in a 26% response rate. And one of the things at the end, we asked for their contact information. And I should say I was a little bit hesitant, but Hannah was like, yes, we must add that in. And actually that was a very smart decision, because in terms of follow-up, that's going to be very helpful. So that's one tip, I would say. And yeah, the data, just lots of great data that supplemented what we got from the listening sessions. And so that was presented in 60 pages of PowerPoint. So lots of data. Next slide, please. Right. And so from that data, and based on all the research that we had done, then we made 14 different recommendations to Destination Cleveland. And here, again, we categorize the recommendations. So we made 2 recommendations with regards to helping to make the city of Cleveland safer and more welcoming to Black and brown visitors. There were 5 that were focused on how Destination Cleveland can become more inclusive to Black and brown hospitality businesses. And then 3 that were focused on the development of the tourism product, and specific to Cleveland's cultural heritage, because it's rich and strong, but it's not well positioned currently. And so that's something that they're working on. And then the final one was relates to the marketing and being more inclusive to Black and brown visitors. And so this is where representation on the website and social media, you name it, comes into play. So that's in a wrap. We don't have time to go into all of the recommendations, but I'm going to hand off, I think, to Hannah, who's going to talk about the application.
Thank you so much, Ursula. And it's so good for all of us to be back together, because this was a really wonderful project to work on together. So it's good to see you all here. So I think first and foremost, I want to share that this is a moment in time, right? This work is never going to end. We're never going to be able to stop listening or stop taking action or modifying action. So we're sharing with you all one moment in time and what we did with that moment in time. But I want you all to know that this in no way makes the work complete. We're going to keep doing what you've heard, iterations of what you've heard. But the first thing we did was took all the insights that we obtained from the Black Travel Alliance, MMGY, and our partners at Third Space Action Lab, and completed a feedback loop. Because a big piece of insight we got was you often come and ask, not just you, the economic development community, the world, comes and asks Black and brown communities questions, and then we don't hear anything else. We hear you want to act, we see you acting a little bit, and then we don't hear any follow-up. So the first thing we did was circled back with everyone who participated in our convening and listening conversations and everyone who participated in this survey and said, here are the insights we heard from all of you. Are we missing anything? And gave them an opportunity to give feedback into that. Then we took all of those insights, and by the way, we weren't missing anything. So great job to all of our teams. Then we went back into our organization and with our board and our staff and our leadership team and started to work towards action. And then once we developed those actions, we went back to those groups again and said, these are the actions we're going to take initially. Are we missing anything? And we refined a little bit based on what they said. And then just last month, at our Destination Cleveland's annual meeting, we launched our actions, and I call these our initial actions because, as I said, our work is never done. And we organize these actions into 3 areas, which are the 3 areas that we consider to be our primary focus of work at Destination Cleveland. We think of them as the 3 legs of a stool. So the first leg, and what I would argue is the most important, particularly in this work, is our organizational foundation and operation. What are we doing at home? What does our staff look like? What does our board look like? What do our vendors look like? What do our partners look like? So we developed actions in those areas. Are we doing training and development around racial equity and inclusion and those types of things? Then I would argue the second most important thing that we do is our primary mission, which is to attract people and improve perceptions. And that's the work Colette leads. We really think of that as product marketing and sales. We think of our work as selling and marketing a product, and that product is our community. And so that's the second bucket of the actions that we're taking. And then the third is the area that I oversee, which is our enhancing experience and enhancing our collaborations with the community. And we think of that as product management and development. So go ahead to the next slide. So you can go to our website at thisiscleveland.com and the About Us section and look at our DEI commitment, where you'll see that action, the statement that we made, and then these actions that we're taking, organized into those 3 areas. And in the interest of time, I'm not going to go deep into each of those today, but I do encourage you to go to our website and check them out and ask us questions. Next slide. What I'm going to do is focus on some actions we've taken in the last 60 days since we've launched this plan. And I'll start with organizational foundation and operations. So one of the things we did, and I know Rick Wilson is joining us here today, he leads our HR, and we launched a confidential voluntary self-ID initiative that's allowing our staff to self-identify as a person with a disability, a member of the LGBTQ+ community, and or a military veteran. And this is in addition to data we already collect about gender, race, ethnicity, just showing our community and our internal staff the importance of understanding diversity and who we are as individuals and what that brings to our organization, and the importance of self-ID. Next one. Under attracting people and improving perceptions, we launched, right after we launched our racial equity roadmap, a digital video promotional series, which highlights Black artists in our community. Soon after the murder of George Floyd, much throughout our country, we had some damage to our downtown. And we wanted to both improve the voices, engage the voices of the individuals that experienced all of the feelings that came with the murder of George Floyd, and also enhance the pedestrian experience where that damage had taken place. So our business improvement district, Downtown Cleveland Alliance, launched an initiative called Voices of Cle, where property owners invited Black artists to come in and create art and their feelings surrounding the murder of George Floyd, and put them in these vacant storefront windows, or even active storefronts. And so we featured those artists in this video series, which you can find on our website, and I would encourage you to check that out. Then we featured an integrated marketing effort during Hispanic Heritage Month to inspire our residents to immerse themselves in our Latino culture, including paid sponsorships with our local CBS and Fox affiliates. We've done website content, social media, and media relations. Next one. And then in enhancing experience and collaboration, building on what Ursula was sharing, we have a rich Black and Latino history here, but due to systemic racism and decades of disinvestment, those cultural assets aren't brought to the forefront. And so we're going to start bringing them to the forefront and working to do what we can to get investment into those neighborhoods and those assets, starting with awareness and building passports to encourage local residents and visitors to get out and experience that rich history. So we have launched a Expressions of Black Culture digital passport that encourages both locals and visitors to get out and experience these expressions of Black culture through public art. And then we're working on an international restaurants passport. Cleveland is home to 114 different ethnicities, and we have a wide array of food in all of those ethnicities. So we want to celebrate those restaurants and encourage locals and visitors to get out and taste them. And then we are, again, getting proximate, and this is part of our organizational foundation and operations. Those neighborhoods that have been disinvested, even our staff has not been to many of them. So we're starting with staff visits to all of our city neighborhoods. And I think there's over 50 neighborhoods in our city that we're going out on foot and walking around and looking at the access, the amenities, the attractions, and the activities in each area, talking to the neighbors that live there as we walk around, meeting with business owners, talking to the Community Development Corporation, and really just listening to understand, and to Colette's point earlier, getting proximate, getting into the neighborhoods and deeply understanding. There's just something different that happens when you're there, even on foot, than if you're in a car. And so we're doing that. We've done 3 so far. We're doing 1 a week and inviting our whole staff to come and join us on these neighborhood walking tours. Next slide. So we also wanted to share some upcoming actions, some things that we're going to launch soon. We are in the midst of a new strategic planning process, and we have an objective to modify our mission to explicitly include diversity, equity, and inclusion as an essential element of our work and all of the efforts that we do. And then we're really working on systems that will allow us to disaggregate all of our data by race to better understand our staff, our board, our visitors, our meeting attendees, businesses that we work with, organizations that we collaborate with, and business vendors that we pay to do things, so that we really can understand. Because it was a big gap, was not just that we weren't engaging businesses of color, but we didn't even know that we weren't. And so we really want to do better at disaggregating our data. Next one. In attracting people and improving perceptions, as Colette shared, we're launching a more inclusive, evolved brand to attract a more diverse visitor audience to Cleveland and create consideration for living and working in the region. And then building on those neighborhood tours, that's the first step, is getting proximate to the neighborhood and really deeply understanding it by being within it. And then we want to work with the neighborhoods to ask them, who are you? Who is your neighborhood? One of the challenges Cleveland has is all of our neighborhoods say they're arts neighborhoods, or all of our neighborhoods say they're brewery districts, or all of them say they're cultural districts or arts districts. And that's fine, but we want to help them differentiate themselves. What kind of an arts district are you? And they are different. We have an African-American arts district. We have a local arts district. We have a Broadway arts district. And so really helping them to get clear, and we won't do it asking them, who are you? Who do you want to be? And then that will allow us to do better brand promotion of each neighborhood, but also to work deeply with the neighborhoods to make sure that who they are and who they want to be is reflective in the experience that they have there. And then we can more deeply build out those experiences to have in the neighborhoods and attract investment into the neighborhoods to capitalize on those distinctive neighborhood identities. Next one. And then in enhancing experience and collaboration, we're going to create a People of Color Visitor Experience Advisory Committee to support us as we build out these neighborhood destination development efforts to work with us to develop, enhance, and package immersive experiences that reflect Cleveland's people of color experience. And then we are in the midst of collaborating, as I said, continuously listening to people of color and the LGBTQ community and veterans to implement programs for capacity building and greater exposure, awareness, and access to Cleveland's travel and tourism economy. As you heard Ursula say, a lot of these businesses just didn't even know what they didn't know. And it might be that we're coming to them and saying, we want to help you market, but they're not even at the point where they're ready to market. They need help with building capital or opening a storefront. And so even if we can't do all of those things, what we can do is bring them information. So we're also working very deeply with our chambers of commerce. We have a Black chamber and a Hispanic chamber and an LGBTQ chamber. So we're building relationships with those organizations to provide programming that doesn't have to come directly from us. It could come from partner organizations, and we could share opportunities that businesses may not know about. Next slide. So all of this is just to reiterate what Colette shared at the end of our statement. We hope that our actions will speak louder than our words, and that this is just the beginning. So that's all I've got. Turn it back to Danny.
Wow. That's all, huh? Kudos to you and the Destination Cleveland organization for all the work you're doing. And I really appreciate, the fact that, your comments regarding that this is a place and time and it's just the beginning. It's a lot of heavy lifting. So I definitely welcome a group conversation at this point. I think that there are so many elements here that participants are probably very curious about. I have a list of questions that we have prepared prior to this webinar, but I know that Ronnie was just shooting me some that he had as well. So I'm happy to turn over the platform to Ronnie to ask some of the questions of the group, and then we can just engage in conversations. We have about 10 minutes left of the webinar left. So thank you.
Thank you, everybody. I think that was an amazing case study. And thank you for the work. I've got two main questions. One is, clearly this is a priority for you. Others will say the same, but will then default to, yes, we'd like to do it. We don't have the money, we don't have the personnel, etc. So I'm just wondering, especially for an organization that, and if you could tell us, I don't know if it came up, how many people work at your DMO? And then just if you have any general thoughts for organizations of any size, how they can get away from that kind of circular thing of, yes, we wish we could, but we can't do it because, or we can't do more than just a tiny thing.
Colette, do you want to take it or do you want me to?
Yeah, feel free.
I'll start. I'm sure you'll have additional insights because we do hear this often. Destination Cleveland is the destination marketing organization for Cuyahoga County, which is the county that surrounds the city of Cleveland. But we work with DMOs throughout the state of Ohio, and some have staffs of 1 or 2. We started pre-pandemic with staff that was nearing 70. So it's very fair that we were a large DMO. Like many DMOs, we were significantly impacted by the global pandemic. And I think during the global pandemic, our staff went down to like 12. And I think we're back to about 30 at this point, with the large percentage of that being in our marketing team, and our sales team is starting to grow back up. My team, for reference, that does destination management, which includes all of our partnerships and relationships with the community, was 19 before the pandemic. And right now I think we have 9. And during the height of the pandemic, there were 4 of us. So I will also share, my husband does product management and often says to me, you know, it doesn't always have to be expensive to get customer insights. You all know who your customers are. You know the businesses in your community, you know who's bringing meetings and conventions to your community, and it could be over coffee. I mean, yes, I'm sure Ursula and Danny and Colette are shaking in their boots a little bit about, you know, is that statistically significant? And it's not, but there are still a lot of insights you can get from people that are in your network to move towards action.
Yeah, totally agree with everything Hannah said. The other thing I think that it's important to embrace is that this is about inclusion. So it should be included in your work. And it's, I think sometimes when we talk about equity and inclusion, it ends up being someone's separate job. And so I think if we can apply a lens to the work we're currently doing, I think that's a way to ensure that we are being inclusive and equitable. So one of the things that came out of our REI task force were these 4 or 5 pillars, and they were, you know, they were really kind of like a strategic lens to look at things through. And so even for something as basic as, okay, just, you know, our hiring, or a better one would be attracting meetings. So when we're looking at attracting meetings, you know, it sounds like, you know, let's just go out and figure out the meeting planners we're going to talk to and sell them on bringing their meeting to Cleveland. Well, with these pillars, okay, well, have you talked to minority meeting planners? Have you really thought through who in the community works for a minority organization that can help bring it here? So what are those questions that you can ask about your everyday work that will remind you of how to be inclusive on a daily basis and in your ongoing work? So I think for a smaller organization, it's really ensuring that you're applying that lens of equity and inclusion to everything that you're doing, and that way it will inherently become a more inclusive strategy going forward.
I just one other question. Oh, sorry, Ursula. Sorry.
Yeah, I would also say that you have to link it back to the economic argument. In that we know that the Black Traveler Study told us that U.S. Black travelers spent 129 billion in 2019. We know that the Hispanic travelers spent 113 billion in the same year. So those numbers, it's like, okay, maybe you can't do the level that Destination Cleveland is currently doing, but within your current resources, what can you tweak to make a few incremental changes that will hopefully get you the 5 to 10% gains in visitors, etc., to boost numbers and make it worth, because really yes, we want you to do this for all the right reasons, but there's a huge economic argument that needs to be like front and center.
I think that had the branding study, the original brand had been developed. If the research we have now had been available when the original branding project had been developed, in terms of, if you look at and the Visas Latinas study and the Black Travelers study, the amount of interest that Black and Brown travelers have in exploring their own culture, whether it's through food, arts, or otherwise. And you look at the spend, to Ursula's point, you look at the increasing changing demographics of the country, I think hopefully it's going to be an economic imperative. I think when you kind of retrofit something, the beautiful part about where we are now in this moment in time, as Hannah said, is this engagement piece, which I thought, sitting in on the listening sessions, there was some tense times, right? There were some tense comments from individuals in the community who, A, perhaps didn't understand the value of travel or the visitor to Cleveland, and B, didn't see themselves for a long time. And this talks about this idea of marginalized, underrepresented communities locally, right? And making the connection and just engaging. I think the research that BTA did, engaging them, or even, I think I remember making some comments about the power of the Black traveler. And all of a sudden, I think these businesses are, kind of woke up to the fact that, wait here. There's actually a clear connection here between who we are within Cleveland and the opportunities that we have. So I think that it just hits so many levels. And I think that, it didn't, I think ultimately one of the learnings that I had, I think in the research and the project as well was, and I continue to see this, is engaging underrepresented communities is not easy. And to Hannah's point regarding this engagement piece about, it doesn't have to be a scientific survey, because oftentimes, and we've seen this in our studies, the response rate tends to be challenging when people don't feel like they've ever been included before. So why do you want to hear from me now? So this idea of layering, right, the listening sessions, the survey, the informal touch base has a lot more value than just clinical surveys and research. So I just wanted to punctuate that, because I think those were interesting learnings that I think I also saw, being kind of on the periphery of the actual work that was being done by Destination Cleveland and BTA.
The last thing I'll share, and it was shared with me many years ago, and I'm very grateful for it, is a very simple action you can take is every time you're sitting around the table, assess who's in the room, and not just from their skin color, but are the arts organizations represented? Are the music industry represented? Is it transportation? And really think about all aspects of diversity and who's missing from the table. And I think just making sure that all interests are added to the table is a huge step in the right direction.
So just quickly, one other question. DEI is so massive in terms of the different identities, communities, etc. It sounded to me, and correct me if I'm mishearing, but that the focus of what you're doing for now, at least, sounded like it was African American and Black communities, LGBTQ plus, veterans, and then Hispanic and Latinx to an extent also. So I'm just curious, was there a process to say this is where we're starting this work?
Yeah, I would say yes. We were pretty intentional about starting with Black and Brown communities. The city of Cleveland is about 50% Black. Cuyahoga County, the county that surrounds Cleveland, is 30% Black. As far as our Hispanic community, I think they're at 6% now, and then the Asian community comes in a little bit after that. And then as far as our LGBTQ community, they're significant as well. So I'd say the crux of this engagement was really in the Black and Brown communities, but we are actually in the midst of gearing up to celebrate Diwali, which I think kicks off on Sunday, I believe, and just trying to make sure that we're constantly being aware of and engaging and supporting all the different underrepresented communities. But you are correct in your perception. That is fact. We absolutely did focus on Black and Brown communities first. Hannah, would you add anything?
Nope, I think that is right.
Just quickly on the veteran side, that's interesting too, because it is something that I think I'm curious to hear a little more, and I know we don't have much time left, but especially because within the Black and Brown communities, there probably is a proportion of folks who are also veterans. So I'm just curious to hear more about how veterans more specifically fits into your work.
I think that is something that we are going to learn more over time. As Colette mentioned, we've started with Black and Brown. And then right now the focus is really on disaggregating the data, really understanding, how many veterans are in our network, how many veterans are on our staff, how many are on our board, is where we have started now. But similar to the process we've gone through, we want to hear from them as well and understand, are their challenges and opportunities different or similar than others? Like you're saying, there's probably a lot of crossover. There's also a lot of the LGBTQ community in our Black and Brown communities. So it's really just disaggregating and really starting to understand what similarities and differences are there within all of these different groups.
Ronnie, Travel Unity, Ursula, Hannah, Colette, thank you so much for collaborating on this project, on creating this wonderful case study. I feel like this is hopefully the first of many presentations we'll have together on this work and continue to evolve as you guys make so much great progress. Thank you for the platform, and I hope everybody has a great rest of the Travel Unity virtual summit. Thanks again.